there's a lot of like nuance around like, if agents are not humans and they're not machines, then what does that identity standard look like in the future?
Welcome to Partner Path, a podcast that unpacks the venture capital and growth equity ecosystem from a junior perspective. Young entrepreneurs and investors have already had a massive impact on the industry, having started unicorns and launched billion-dollar funds. We discuss these success stories and more by sharing perspectives and advice from some of the industry's most prominent role models. This podcast expresses our views as of the date published and does not represent the views of and is not endorsed by any company for which we work. Before we get to the episode, Laura and I are excited to announce a partnership with Overlap. Fresh out of Y Combinator's summer batch, Overlap is an AI-driven app that uses large language models to curate the best moments from podcast episodes. Imagine having a smart assistant who reads through every podcast transcript, finds the best parts or parts most relevant to your search, and strings them together to form a new, curated stream of content. That is what Overlap does. I personally use Overlap to explore content on future podcast guests and highly recommend it as another diligence tool for investors. Check out Overlap on the App Store today.
Today we're chatting with Daniel Mason, co-founder and CEO at Anon. Daniel previously founded Spring Labs, a platform that builds data privacy technology to power use cases across financial services, consumer identity, and crypto. And now Daniel's focused on building the identity layer for agents. Welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Excited to chat today.
After graduation, you worked in a variety of product manager roles before starting sabbatical co-working. What exactly sparked your interest in becoming an entrepreneur and going into the co-working space after seeing some of the hardships that WeWork has faced?
I feel like my journey to entrepreneurship was like a pretty easy transition, actually. I actually didn't work anywhere for very long. Like I had a job right out of college at a startup, which is pretty rare when I was graduating college, like much more common now. But I happened to have a friend who started a company that I joined, taught myself to code, was an engineer there in the very early days. And we built marketing software and we worked with companies that were doing like advertising campaigns. It was kind of like an ad tech company. And occasionally companies would come to us and ask if we could help them with professional services. And we would do that for engagements that were above a certain size. And I was also a BD guy in addition to an engineer and source deals. And sometimes the company would say no, and I would say yes to those deals and do them on the nights and weekends. And within a couple of years, and I had another job during this time too at Red Hat as a product manager. But during this time, at some point I looked up and was making more money from my night and weekend side job than I was from my main W-2 paycheck. So I decided to start working for myself exclusively. And that was kind of the start of the entrepreneurial journey.
And that was Spring Labs?
No, this was way before Spring Labs. This was when I was just out of college. And then, yeah, you mentioned sabbatical co-working. I mean, that was actually a business I started with my brother. My brother worked in real estate private equity. And we both had this vision of remote work as kind of the future of work, or at least some sort of hybrid work, which was really not the case then. This was like 2013 or something. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we wanted to build a space for digital nomads to go travel and work. So we moved to Puerto Rico together. We master leased a hotel, tried to get a couple more hotels, raised some money for it. And yeah, it was a catastrophic disaster. We can go more into it if you want, but it was a fun foray into a totally different type of entrepreneurship. And through those first two experiences, I think I realized I don't want to build large-scale services businesses, and I don't want to build non-tech businesses, especially in other countries where it's a lot harder to be an entrepreneur. So yeah, I was kind of set on building venture-backed tech companies after that.
Okay, that's fair. Do you think the bottleneck was more on the former or the latter?
Of those two types of company? With the services business, like with my consulting business I ran, it actually got decently sized over time. It was just always boring, is like my only complaint about it. It was like good cash flow, a consistent customer base. We had like a service that people wanted. We did a lot of marketing and data science consulting work was like what we found our specialty. And yeah, it was just like, I don't know, I woke up every day and wasn't excited by it. So after a few years of doing it, even though it was like a great economic opportunity, I decided I wanted to go do something else.
And that's when you went to Spring Labs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And maybe break down how you got the idea. I mean, you raised a lot of venture money, which is very impressive. and hard to do. But talk about like the original thesis and how it evolved.
So Spring Labs was a company I started in 2017 with a few co-founders. It was a very lucky break for me in some ways because my co-founders were very seasoned entrepreneurs who had built businesses together previously. I was kind of like the last guy to join in. Like there were four of us, the other three businesses together in the past, including some like very large businesses that are one's now publicly traded and some really serious companies. And the original vision for the business was that we wanted to build a new credit bureau, which is kind of one of those tar pit ideas you hear a lot of startups pitch and then eventually pivot away from. That was kind of our trajectory on it too. But I think we thought we had a lot of connections in the financial services space, and a lot of our early customers were fintech businesses. And the business, it's a multi-product business now that does a bunch of different things. But the first product that we built was really like a data storage tokenized vault type product, which was kind of what a credit bureau would do anyway. And we ended up working with credit bureaus instead of becoming a credit bureau. TransUnion eventually became a big customer of ours. They also were one of our largest investors and led our Series B round. So we ended up working in the credit bureau space, just not in the exact original version of the idea.
Did you take any lessons from your first in entrepreneurship and to Spring Labs?
I honestly was kind of in the passenger seat for that one. I was the one learning from my other co-founders in that business. I think that I learned from my earlier businesses. When you build a services business, you learn how to sell. So I did a lot of our selling. I ran product in the early days of the company, but for most of my time there, I ran our sales and marketing and growth operations. And I think that I learned to sell and selling my own services for years, kind of in that side business. And that's made me a better salesperson and kind of builder of sales teams. But other than that, on fundraising, on product, on engineering, I learned so much from my co-founders in that business.
I think one of the best skill sets is someone who's technical that can sell.
Yeah.
It's hard to come by.
I think so. And I'm by like proper technical standards, I'm not technical. Like
you can code.
I code from time to time. I code a lot more these days with AI tools, actually. I feel like my GitHub finally has some green on it after a few years of being pretty dark.
All right, so you're using Cursor.
Yeah.
Do you think you have to have a base skill set nowadays, technical base, to build a company?
I think it depends on the type of company. I feel that every company has some things that are its differentiator. It's like, what do you have to get right to build this company? And I think in like a post AI world, a lot of times you just have to get distribution or something to build the company. The actual product is somewhat simple, as you know, I don't want to say a wrapper. I think that term's like way overused, but there's not as much technical, like some companies, and on I would say like, we have a lot that we have to build technically. Like we have like risk in building on the technical side as well as the distribution side. But I think there's a lot of businesses, it's like a better product for, you know, accounting firms or for like some like large scale business where what you really have to get is distribution on top of the product.
So maybe we should touch on Anon and how you got to Anon and what is Anon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started Anon about 2 years ago. So I left Spring Labs a while after our Series B round. I'd sort of like worked my way out of a job. I was the chief strategy officer, I think was my last role there, after we hired a chief revenue officer who had sold a lot larger contracts and stuff than me in like a past life. So eventually left. I actually worked in venture for a year at a fund called Framework Ventures that I knew the founders of.
Did it give you a different perspective being on the other side of the table?
Yeah, it did. It did. I think it made me understand fundraising more, and it made me think more about markets and sizing and a lot of the meta aspects of companies, I think, that when you're in the trenches day to day, you just don't think as much about. But yeah, and I kind of thought I would do that for a while, investing, and was honestly pretty burnt out on startups after Spring Labs. Just like it's a journey. I think anyone who's ever started a company, like by year 5 or whatever that I was in, like you're pretty tired. I don't know. I just was really fascinated by some of the things going on in the AI space. And I think at this intersection of building companies in identity and security and this advent of new AI technology, we got really obsessed with this, like what we'll call like identity layer of agents, or how agents use human identities, use like machine identities, how they get access to accounts, because a lot of the things that you want your agent to do, they need to use your account for. So I think it's a really important kind of primitive in the broader stack.
But were you not seeing Auth0, their product, were they not doing it well today?
I think that it's actually a very nuanced concept that's still kind of playing out over time. I actually get a lot of outreach. It's funny, from a lot of people on different, especially investors actually, that are like, oh, I have a thesis on agent identity. And I'm always like, okay, what's your thesis? And I just find that people haven't really thought it through that much in a lot of instances. What I would say is that you almost today have this bipolar idea of what identity is. Like, identity is either human identity, which is an email password, a magic link, passkeys. It's like something that is an authentication mechanism for humans. And on the other side, you have machine identity, right? You have API keys, you have OAuth, you have ways of authorizing an application to basically act on behalf of you. And agents have to be one of those two things. So when you look at the rollout of different types of technologies, you see that agents are either using human identities and that the agent's collecting an email and password, authenticating the user, and then letting it take actions on your behalf, which is usually using computer use, or sometimes it's using reverse engineering. It's like usually when there's not an API route. And when there is an API route, OAuth is still the dominant authentication mechanism. And OAuth is designed for delegation of human identity to a machine, which actually fits an agent pretty well. But there's a lot of like nuance around like, if agents are not humans and they're not machines, then what does that identity standard look like in the future? And I think you are seeing people like Okta did a release actually very recently that's something like they called like non-human identity or something, which is like kind of a blend of the two identities. I need to dig more into it.
We're invested in a non-human identity company.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're going to start doing well because because you could consider it a non-human. Mm-hmm. So perhaps if there's more breaches, then folks are going to be turning to not the traditional identity players, which is a very solved place, but the non-human on the security side. But you're more on the developer side. Yeah. Right. How are you approaching the problem differently? What does it look like to work or to use Anon?
I would say that like our product lives, I almost would put authentication into two camps. There's like defensive authentication and more like offensive authentication. I don't know if I've never heard anyone else use that, but that's kind of how I think about it. And we're specifically in the business of giving agents access to tools. So, like a better comp for us would be businesses like Plaid that have been built in the past that were building automation on top of like some sort of workflow where there weren't APIs or there weren't easy ways of building that automation. We're not in the business of, like, we work for the agent companies. We don't work for the services that are furnishing access to the agent companies, if that makes any sense. Like, Auth is objectively on the other side, I would say, of this.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Laura and I are thrilled to announce a partnership with Grata, an intuitive deal sourcing and diligence platform. Keep missing out on private market deals? Ditch the Rolodex and get Grata. Grata's AI-powered platform provides accurate data, deep insights, and time-saving workflows that help get more deals done. And it's trusted by over 500 firms and 3,000 deal makers, including myself. I've personally used Grata in both my deal sourcing and diligence workflows and would recommend their tool to any investor across private equity, growth equity, corp dev, or investment banking. We've negotiated a special offer for our audience. Mention PartnerPath to the Grata team during sign-up, and you'll get free executive seats for your partners and MDs included in your subscription. Now, back to the episode.
How do you handle the services or the applications where you can't integrate with today, but they're asking you for that?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. We chose this specific type of business to work with because I think if you divide it into the offensive and defensive authentication and then things where there are good routes with APIs and things where there aren't good routes with APIs, I think that anything on the API side, I'm curious to learn more. I actually don't know a ton about startups building in this like non-human identity space, but there's this interesting blog that I've sent to a bunch of people that says like Agent Auth is just OAuth or something is the title of the article. And it's basically making the case that for things where APIs exist, this 96% good for actually being agent identity. Like, it is missing a few things. I think there's been some like interesting posts about it missing rate limits and time, like you can't time bound OAuth and things. But the way, I don't know, the same way you let Calendly use your Google Calendar to book times, it's actually really easy to let an agent use your Google Calendar to send emails. And there could be more protections put in place for the non-determinism of LLMs, but it's actually pretty good. We like the space we're in because we think the internet is like a big, vast place, and there's a lot of automations that you can't do today. And we think a lot of companies struggle with that, and a huge amount of the services economy and a lot of the messy things, the rooms full of people that are all doing the same clicking and repetitive actions, or the follow these 16 steps to integrate this new tool. We think that's where there's a massive amount of opportunity, and there aren't APIs there. And in the world of APIs not existing, there's actually a massive amount of room for how identity is solved in that space. And that's the space that we're really focused on.
That's interesting. Have you seen any unique automation use cases today where Anon has become a critical part of the workflow?
Totally. We have sort of two products, I would say, that people use this for in different ways today. One is kind of our original product that we launched, which is almost just the identity layer. It's like we collect credentials, we handle authentication, and then we authenticate users. A lot of startups and early agent companies, a lot of things you saw on Twitter probably last year were using that product. We have recently, though, we've gotten much more interested in building much deeper into the stack and actually building the agents, building the authentication, building more of the infrastructure and the actual capturing more of the business value ourselves and building more for specific use cases. And these are the types of use cases that are more repeatable. They're on the enterprise side versus the consumer side. And yeah, I think there's a lot of them. And that's where we've been really focused. Like we're going to announce some big logos of companies we're working with in the next couple of months and the specific use cases we're working on with them. So I may save that for that announcement.
Yes,
but
we'll put it in the LinkedIn post. I mean, it sounds like we're pretty early to the agent market, but it sounds like for anyone to stand and deploy an agent in production, you need authentication. So that's probably why your area has had more traction than maybe some of the other agent infrastructure areas, because this is one of the first things that your customers are turning to. I
mean, I think the word agent is just so broad. It's like software with an LLM is how people use it. So I don't know, like it's called so many different things.
Yeah.
We're specifically focused on, agents that drive browsers or use computer use models to like handle things. So it's a different era of agents. I would say the first agents that really work would be, I don't know if people call chat applications agents or, that's obviously the thing that worked first. I think that agents that use APIs are working now. I mean, I use it on a daily basis. Like I use an MCP server within a client like Claude and have it like draft emails, write emails, do research, all that kind of stuff. Like I would call that objectively an agent, even though it's more in like a co-pilot versus like an autopilot function. And I think it's easier. I really do think the auth piece is easier when there are APIs. And like all the MCP servers right now just use OAuth as an auth mechanism. But I think those are agents that are working. I think the more different from how software works today you get, the more new tooling that needs to be built in support of the space.
Yeah, so how does Anon evolve with the space or without APIs?
So in bringing this all into a single product, instead of serving as a thinner horizontal layer in it, we control more about how it works. So we do take credentials from end users. I mean, our product looks a lot like Plaid. If you've seen, like I'd like to mention that back, it's a modal that can be used within a dashboard we build, or it can be embedded within a dashboard within our customers' products. We collect credentials, we authenticate users, we securely store those credentials. We do some other things to make it to where we can do persistent authentications or syncs over time to where it's not always just one-time authentication. So we actually are building a little bit into what I'll call the defensive side of authentication for some of those use cases. And then, yeah, we're deciding, I think, from like a UX perspective, how much of tooling to expose to end users versus how much of the tooling we build ourselves. Our product, as we're working with a lot of these larger logos right now, is less of a developer product, and it more feels like an API. It sort of feels like a magic API where there isn't an API otherwise, where your API used to be 30 people sitting in a room and doing some repetitive task, and now all of a sudden that's sort of solved. And we're building that in a scalable way right now. And then over time, we're certainly going to expose more and more of that, but it lets us build a more reliable, resilient product when we're a bigger piece of the stack for a smaller number of use cases.
And so you're handling the authentication and the integrations today.
Yep.
What your customers are requesting.
Authentication, integrations, also building the agents and building the automations. And we're doing more on that side.
But you're not being the browser use of the browser-based side of an agent.
No, we use a lot of tooling. I mean, we use a lot of any infrastructure that's been built in that space, we adopt. We'll use people to build proxies. We'll use companies like Browserbase to build headless browsers. We'll use these tools as part of our stack, but we are the ones that are actually building the agents for many of these use cases.
Interesting. How do you decide as a solo founder and CEO like which direction to take? Do you rely heavily on your CTO, or now that you've done this a few times, do you rely on your own intuition?
From a perspective of like company direction?
Yeah.
I think we just learn a lot in market. I mean, I would say that one of my hot takes on the computer use space overall is that there are not as many use cases as people think there will be for it, but the use cases that there are will be like deep, deep use cases. Like the number of conversations I've gone into recently with people where I say, hey, what are you excited about in the agent space? So like computer use models. I'm like, great. What is your favorite commercial use case for computer use models? And they're like,
I mean, how would an enterprise use it today? What is actually working with computer use?
I mean, enterprises have huge services teams that support certain functions within the company. There are also very big businesses in the RPA space, and there are a lot of people that do a lot of things with antiquated methods, computer use models that are just automated script writing and cron jobs and things like that. Like there is a lot of surface area to replace on that side. I think what I mean more is that if you go to the operator page within ChatGPT and you look at the use cases, it has all these boilerplate use cases you can scroll through. And it's go order a burrito on DoorDash and go book my reservation. And I don't know, last year we still get so many ins for our product that people are like, oh, the thing I'm building is a consumer agent. The thing I'm building is a travel agent. The thing I'm building is a food ordering agent or a date planning agent. And I don't know that those will be commercial use cases for computer use. And I don't think it has anything to do with the models and where they are. When you think about things that are worth automating from a financial perspective, from a commercial perspective, and where it's actually better for a human, you look at big companies like Apple with Siri and Amazon with Alexa that have tried building something that was in this human consumer, prosumer automation space for a long time and have really struggled with it. I think it's not all technology related. There are some use cases that will be really killer, but I don't think people are going to stop using DoorDash and use DoorDash via chatbot.
You have to think about your day-to-day and what takes up the most time. For me, what takes up a lot of time is writing a memo.
Yeah.
That can take hours. So therefore, but that's not, you wouldn't use computer use for that. You would likely use GPT based on the research and summarizing the notes you already have.
Totally. But I think using computer use for research is the browse the web functionality that's been built into ChatGPT and Claude and all Perplexity and all these products is actually really killer functionality. But I think, for taking actions, I don't know. I had somebody who I consider really, really intelligent in this space categorize it like AI is going to be really good where it's replacing jobs, not tasks. And if you think about the average person, they don't do that many jobs on a daily basis outside of their work life. I don't know, how many vacations do people really plan a year? How many times do people really book restaurant reservations? I think people get a little mixed up because the type of people that are early adopters of agents actually are taking a lot of trips and booking a lot of things and all these, but the average person doesn't. Like, I don't think these are mass market consumer products.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing work today is some of the tedious, repetitive work. We're seeing a lot of contact center automation as well.
Totally.
That goes more into the voice AI space. A lot of go-to-market tools, a lot of customer support, and then coding, obviously. But these are use cases where you have what good looks like, so you're able to hopefully mimic that into an agentic or AI product. But I don't know what happens in some of these more ambiguous spaces where what good looks like isn't necessarily defined.
Yeah, 100%. I think that finding use cases where you know what good looks like is actually a really good way to put it. I think that deterministic workflows where you're able to objectively evaluate, did the agent do what it was supposed to? And there's intuition in the how, but not a lot of intuition in the what, is actually the type of use cases that we're personally going after. and that I think are going to be the best ones in the space, at least in the early days.
When you think about, if you have a market map in your head right now, you have frameworks, hosting, routing, observability, evals, authentication, all these layers of the agent infrastructure stack. Some are converging. Do you think there's any layer that's just not going to be needed, or that maybe one of the hyperscalers or foundation model companies will just own?
I think the big question that people are running into is how much is the infrastructure that worked for computers in the past and for building software in the past the same as for building software in the future? I think that there are instances where the how is better. I think Cursor's objectively taken over the Valley and seemingly the world soon, because it's like the how you write software that is better, but you're still writing software. Agents are still code. Like I mentioned before, we have seen companies that are building what I'll call defensive authentication for agents. And I don't actually understand that space. I don't understand what people are really building, because I actually think that slightly different implementations of OAuth, which is like an existing standard, are sufficient. I think that for hosting, a lot of the same tools are sufficient. I think for observability, there's maybe some differences, but I think a lot of the original observability tools actually are still pretty useful. I mean, I think there's more on that side, depending on like how deep you go. And I think there are things that are very unique about agents in some aspects and not in others. But I don't know. I don't think the enemy of agents isn't like necessarily people launching new agent products. It's just like, are you sufficiently differentiated from traditional infrastructure in building agents? Because agents are still just software.
I think that the difference between machine learning and Gen AI, you started to see a new wave of tools coming up, but I think a lot of the Gen AI tools you will be able to use for agents. What you said with observability, evals, I'm seeing that space converge, and people just started in one package, monitoring logs, testing the agent in production or testing your application in production. But I think generally speaking, there'll only be a few nuanced areas to spend something up. Do you price based on outcomes today?
We price based on usage today, but usage is heavily tied to outcomes.
Okay. Can you unpack that a little bit, what that means?
We're facilitating specific workflows and we charge like per workflow. So we charge a monthly base rate as a platform fee. And then the more you use the product, the more you pay for it. Similar to, like I mentioned Plaid earlier, similar pricing to that. The more data you pull, the more people are paying us to basically go and retrieve data in complex workflows for them.
Do you think with some of these, more of the application layer of agents, do you think this pricing debate that's going on, there actually will be a pricing evolution? Or do you think it will still be what we've been seeing with SaaS for the last decade?
I think that we'll price agents like a human, not software, is silly.
I actually want to get your take on, I haven't unpacked this with anyone yet, but like Cognition's recent pricing change, where they went from like $200 a month, or no, was it $500 per seat, I guess, to now, I think they're trying to match Cursor's model closely. Do you think it's just because the products that are on the market today, they're just evolving so quickly and advancing, and they're offering a lower price point for the same capabilities as your autonomous AI engineer? So therefore, the price basically converges down to where the standard of what good looks, which is Cursor right now, might change.
I don't know that it has anything to do with Cursor. I would just say pricing dynamics are driven by the same market dynamics that have always driven markets. The product costs a certain amount to build. It's worth a certain amount to the end customer. If someone tries to charge $500 a month and their competitor is charging $20 a month, everyone's going to choose their competitor. And the product costs, a few dollars a month to deliver, probably, in terms of infrastructure cost. So it's just like if you were the only guy mowing lawns in town and you had the only lawnmower and you charged $1,000 a yard, and then someone bought a second lawnmower and started charging $50 a yard, your pricing has to come down to match that. Pricing has nothing to do with the presentation of it or whether you give your agent a name, like, hey, this is Doug, my agent, he's $100,000. Like, it just has to do with the value you're delivering and what the cost relatively to other competitors into the market is.
It sounds like something you're alluding to is it also just comes down to execution and go to market speed.
Yeah. I think markets behave like markets behave in a lot of ways. It's like a very just like baseline economics. Having your agent seem more like a human versus not, or having it be, if somebody comes up with something that adds insane value and it can't be replicated by any competitors for whatever reason, then they're going to be able to charge an ungodly amount of money for it. But as soon as you have market competition, it's going to drive prices down.
Do you have a product you admire that charges a lot?
A product
that has it's like unparalleled in terms of works well. You would pay double for it today.
I think this space is moving so fast. I've talked before, I was a big early adopter of Claude and the Anthropic products.
Yeah.
And there was a point in time I was probably using it like 8 hours a day in my work to write everything I wrote, to send memos, send messages, plans, write PRDs, like everything we do. It's still good, but I think that ChatGPT has launched a lot of improvements recently and has come to parity with it, maybe even better. I think these products, like, again, they actually drive so much outsized value. If I objectively were how much productivity do I get by using these products on a daily basis, then I would pay them tens of thousands of dollars a year for a personal license. But luckily there's competition in the market, so they drive each other's prices down and you don't have to worry about it. So
yeah. Do you use Perplexity?
Yeah.
Over Google?
Yeah. I really like it.
Why is that?
I really like it because I think it gives the answer you're looking for. I think Google's product, I think Google's done a lot of amazing work, but objectively Google's so heavily gamified at this point. Yeah, with ads and with SEO, if you're like, what's the best, give me 5 pizza places in South Park to go to lunch. It's like, who's bidding the most, who hired the agency. My consulting business I built years ago, we did a lot of SEO work, game Google. There's a whole thing around it. I think Perplexity's results are cleaner. It gives me the thing I'm looking for. It has citations. I don't know how they monetize, but beyond that, I think it's great.
Do you think people will start to game Perplexity, GPT, all of the foundation model consumer products with this new wave of AI SEO companies?
I think that is the question, right? Because Google, it's honestly this trade-off between experience and monetization. Google is the best monetization machine that's ever been built, and it's heavily gamed. I think actually Google, in hindsight, probably should have spent more time thinking about UX and less about monetization maybe over the last, and they might not be in as not that they're in a precarious position, but they have people
real threats
sieging them for the first time, right? Their business is under attack. And right now, Perplexity is pristine in that there are no ads and it gives you objectively the right results. But I think there's a real question of monetization on that. And maybe they meet more in the middle at some point and Google has to retreat from their, money printing machine to deliver a better experience. And probably Perplexity has to build some ads and some bias.
Or Google buys Perplexity.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think, yeah.
Okay, do you want to end with a quick fire round? We went a little off script, but that's okay.
Totally.
Actually, I don't think I asked any questions on the script. What's the one word to describe your company culture today?
I would say fun. I think that we really are trying to build a culture. A big learning I had from my last company is that it's a journey. Things are going to go well, things are not going to go well. And over time, the thing that is consistent is the people that are around the table through those good times and bad. So we really try to make time to have a good time with each other, bond with each other. We work really hard. We spend a lot of hours in the office. But last night we had an amazing customer demo. We killed it and we did a celebratory game night and hung out at the office. And I think it's really important to find that balance.
What's one or two attributes of a new candidate that you're looking at that you really admire?
So again, based on, I'd say, experience, we hire people that have done the thing before. And what I mean by that is we're hiring a lot of engineers right now. So any great engineers watching, reach out to me. We want to hire startup engineers that have built startups before. And we want to hire people to lead teams that have led teams before. We want to hire people at this stage we're at right now where, we're early but growing really quickly that have been early and grown really quickly before. I think you get a lot of interviews where someone's like, yeah, I've worked at, Meta for the last 8 years, but I really want to go work at a startup because I want more ownership. And, it's not that I don't believe them. I think they're being disingenuous, but I don't think they know what that means. I think until you've sat in that exact seat, you actually don't really know what you're talking about. So I want people that have sat in that seat before and done that exact thing before. And it usually means you're finding more like diamond in the rough type of candidates. They don't have the big logos. They probably don't have the schools. We're not averse to that and we will hire people like that. But our big criteria is that you're hardworking, you're humble, you've done the thing you're doing before, and you're motivated by the mission, the team, the journey, not the equity price or the comp or things like that.
And what's an AI tool that people aren't talking enough about?
An AI tool that people aren't talking enough about, Anon.
Will passwords ever fully die?
Will passwords ever fully die? Maybe. What's a funny thing is that we had all this move to certain types of passwordless auth, passkeys and stuff, which I think are okay, and CAPTCHAs, which, now are getting solved at a lower rate with humans than AI. Like AI is actually better at solving. The funny thing is the thing that is actually really effective in handling, did this user actually really want this other service to use the thing that they're using, is old school two-factor authentication. It's sending a text message to the person and having them enter that code in, because it establishes a physical presence of a user holding a phone and access to the device. People don't change phone numbers that often. It's hard to hack. It's funny. It's like some things never change and that Auth does, but I actually think passwords will be around for a pretty long period of time.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
That was fun.